Let's begin where many chosen ones are most confused: isolation. Not just the external kind, being left out, misunderstood, or withdrawn from society, but the inner kind that wraps itself around your spirit like a fog you can't explain. The silence between you and the world becomes so loud you wonder if you've been forgotten by God, but let me tell you, this is not a detour. It's not a mistake. It's not even a pause. It is a necessary part of the anointing. You were pulled away because something sacred was being whispered into your life, and it required the kind of stillness that only isolation can provide. The truth is, spiritual transformation rarely occurs in the crowd. It happens in caves, deserts, and quiet rooms where no one claps for you, no one validates you, and no one sees what you're becoming. The world trains people to perform, to posture, to seek applause. But divine preparation is different. It strips away all the layers that don't belong. It removes the false self, the survival masks, the noise of societal expectation, until what is left is only what is real. That kind of purification is brutal, but it is also beautiful, because it creates a person who is not just informed, but transformed, someone who is not just capable, but consecrated. So when we speak of being chosen, we must be honest. The choosing is not glamorous. The choosing is often marked by a violent departure from what you thought your life would be. Friends fade, opportunities dissolve, people you trusted turn cold or disappear altogether. It can feel like punishment. But what if I told you it's actually a sign of proximity, that the more intense your separation, the more sacred your assignment? See, the anointing on your life, especially when it carries danger for systems of darkness, requires you to be recalibrated. And recalibration doesn't happen in celebration, it happens in obscurity. Your absence from the crowd is God's strategy for preserving your clarity. In isolation, your attention is reclaimed. You begin to hear things again, not just externally, but internally. You become aware of patterns, habits, beliefs that no longer serve the person you're becoming. This is the point where many break, because isolation exposes everything. You can't hide from yourself when there's nowhere left to run, and that is exactly the point. Because here's the paradox. Only in deep solitude can you meet the parts of yourself that were too buried to surface in the noise. The neglected child, the unresolved wound, the unprocessed trauma. And if you are to carry something sacred, something that has the power to heal, awaken, or liberate, then these parts of you must be integrated, not ignored. They must be brought into the light, not bypassed by performance. Your isolation is where that inner reunion begins. Philosophically speaking, this stage is a necessary death, a death of the former self. The ego protests because it wants certainty, identity, praise. But the spirit whispers a deeper invitation to become whole, not just seen. And it's in that threshold, where your old ways no longer work, but your new ways haven't formed, that the chosen ones often sit for long seasons. Don't rush that. That liminal space, as uncomfortable as it is, becomes holy ground, because when you emerge, you will not just be informed by God's voice. You will embody it. Many people ask, why does it feel like God has left me? But perhaps the better question is, why am I being made so still? Because the stripping is not abandonment, it's refinement. The people who carry dangerous anointings must be emptied of everything that could corrupt the weight of what they will eventually carry. Pride, resentment, impulsivity, ego, all of it must go, and that removal happens most clearly when the external world goes quiet. You're not being hidden from your destiny. You're being hidden asterisk for asterisk it. Some of you are in that stage right now. You've lost community, you've lost momentum, You question your sanity at times because nothing feels aligned anymore. That is not failure, that is friction, and friction is the sign that transformation is underway. If you feel disoriented, disconnected, or even depressed, don't numb it, sit with it. Ask what is being revealed in this silence. Ask what needs to die, not just in your habits, but in your perception of yourself. This is sacred work. Painful, yes, but sacred. You don't train warriors in the public eye. You train them in secret, under pressure, with no audience and no applause. That's how you know the strength is real. So if life has taken you out of circulation, if your voice has been silenced, if your gifts are dormant, trust the timing. The same power that calls you will also isolate you, not to punish you, but to protect what is growing. The more dangerous your anointing, the more private your preparation, and when that season ends, you will not emerge the same. You will come back with words that carry fire, presence that disturbs darkness, and a spirit that no longer bows to fear. Because you have been with God in the silence, and once you've heard His voice there, you are never the same. So do not despise your isolation. It is not exile, it is consecration. Let's talk about what it means to carry a spiritual sensitivity that borders on burden. It's not something you chose, and it's certainly not something that makes life easier. In fact, for those with an intense and dangerous anointing, this kind of sensitivity often becomes one of the most misunderstood and exhausting aspects of the calling. You're not just aware of your own emotional world, you're plugged into the undercurrents of everyone around you, and often you don't even realize it's happening. This kind of awareness isn't intellectual, it's visceral. You walk into a room and feel the weight before anyone speaks. You can sense unrest behind a smile, manipulation beneath flattery, fear inside arrogance. You see through things into people, situations, atmospheres. Not through effort, but through attunement. That's the mark of a spiritually sensitive individual, and it is both gift and responsibility. It gives you access to unspoken truth, but it also means you are never really off. The signal is always active, and when you're not trained or grounded in it, it can feel like emotional overload, or worse, madness. People around you may say you're too intense, too emotional, too dramatic, but they don't understand. You're not reacting to what they see. You're responding to what they don't. You're picking up on energies, patterns, and spiritual realities that haven't reached the surface yet. You see storms on the horizon long before the clouds form, and because of that, your reactions are often labeled as overreactions. But in truth, you're simply ahead of the curve, and that foresight is part of what makes your anointing dangerous, because it exposes what others are still trying to conceal. This sensitivity often begins in childhood. Many of you were labeled overly sensitive or too shy growing up. But if you look closely, you'll see it was never just emotion. You were absorbing the dysfunction of the room, even if no one spoke about it. You could feel when your parents were anxious, even if they pretended everything was fine. You could feel when someone wasn't safe, even if they had a charming smile. That wasn't just intuition, it was discernment in its raw, undeveloped form. The spiritually sensitive are often drawn to the wounded, the forgotten, the broken. Not because they are weak, but because they carry healing in their very presence. Without trying, without speaking, they create space where people feel safe to unravel. But here's the danger. When you don't know how to manage this gift, you end up absorbing other people's chaos without even realizing it. You become a container for emotions that aren't yours. You start to carry depression, anxiety, or fear that has no origin in your own story. And without awareness, this can spiral into self-doubt or burnout. Philosophically, we can say this: Awareness without boundaries leads to collapse. The chosen one must learn not just to feel, but to filter. You are not called to fix every wound you feel. You are called to listen to the instruction behind the emotion, because every sensation is a message, but not every message is a mission. When you carry a dangerous anointing, your empathy becomes a weapon in the spirit, but only if you learn how to wield it, rather than be crushed by it. And let's not romanticize it. This level of sensitivity is lonely, it's exhausting. Most people don't understand why you're tired after a simple conversation, or why certain places drain you even if nothing visible went wrong. But you know, your system is reading spiritual data like a radar. It's scanning for alignment, integrity, hidden motives, even spiritual activity. And when the data doesn't match the surface, you feel it as a disturbance in your nervous system. That's not imagination. That's anointing, and it's training you to move through the world with discernment rather than reaction. But discernment, real discernment, is not paranoia. It's not about looking for darkness under every stone. It's about walking through life with eyes that see beyond the physical. It's about hearing truth in silence. It's about noticing what is absent just as much as what is present. The spiritually sensitive are not here to be overwhelmed by the world. They're here to decode it, disrupt it, and if necessary, dismantle it. But to do that, you must protect your clarity. You must create rhythms of silence where you reconnect with what is truly yours. You must learn to ask, is this mine, or am I carrying it for someone else? Because if you do not distinguish between the two, your compassion will become captivity. Your gift will feel like a curse. So many of the chosen are walking around heavy, not because they lack faith, but because they lack understanding of what they're carrying. You don't need to harden your heart, but you need to anchor your soul, ground yourself in truth, not emotion. Be gentle but sharp, soft but immovable, because when you're trained in this level of discernment, you become a force. Not loud, not flashy, but unstoppable, and your very presence begins to shift atmospheres without a single word spoken. So if you feel too much, sense too much, know too much, don't suppress it, sharpen it. Because what feels like a burden now, when refined, will become the very blade that cuts through confusion and brings truth into places that have forgotten what it sounds like. One of the clearest yet most unsettling signs of a dangerous anointing is unexplainable opposition, resistance that appears out of nowhere, without logical cause, and often at the very moment when you begin to move in the direction of your purpose. This isn't normal difficulty. It's not the kind of friction that comes from poor planning or natural consequences. This is a deeper, almost invisible interference that seems to have a timing and intelligence of its own. Something you can't quite see, but can certainly feel like the wind that shakes the trees though the air seems still. Many people mistake this opposition for failure. They think, maybe I'm on the wrong path, maybe I missed the mark. But more often than not, that's exactly the moment you're stepping into alignment. When the chosen step forward, resistance doesn't mean you're off track. It means you're finally on it. This is because the spiritual realm recognizes your identity before the physical world does. Your enemies, seen and unseen, sense your arrival before your friends even notice your potential. You may still be uncertain, still hesitant, still feeling unprepared, but the resistance knows exactly who you are. That's why the attacks come early and often, before you've even built anything worth attacking. It's not about what you're doing. It's about what you're carrying, and what you carry has consequences for systems that thrive on deception, complacency, or bondage. Your anointing threatens that equilibrium. Philosophically, this touches on the nature of opposition itself. Resistance is not random, it is reactive. Darkness reacts to light. Structures of falsehood react to truth. And spiritual authority is not neutral, it disrupts. So the moment a chosen one begins to awaken, begins to see clearly, begins to break cycles or expose hidden dysfunction, a ripple moves through the invisible. And this ripple generates resistance not because of what has been done, but because of what is now possible. In that sense, opposition becomes a mirror. It reflects the weight of what your presence alone begins to shift. You'll notice it often starts subtly. Misunderstandings arise that you didn't cause. People become uncomfortable around you, though you've done nothing wrong. Projects fall apart the moment they begin. Resources dry up without explanation. The path that was wide suddenly narrows. And if you're not spiritually grounded, it will feel like sabotage, or worse, like rejection from life itself. But understand, the greater the anointing, the more strategic the resistance. You're not being opposed for who you are right now. You're being opposed for the version of you that's coming, because that version carries fire, that version liberates others. That version cannot be controlled, and anything that thrives on spiritual stagnation sees that as a threat. This is why the anointed often experience deep internal conflict at critical moments. Right when you're about to speak, fear grips your throat. Right when you're about to step out, your mind floods with self-doubt. This isn't always psychological, it's spiritual. The atmosphere is reacting to the sound of your footsteps. Not everyone sees you coming, but the realm you are assigned to influence does. And it's not going to greet you with open arms. Yet here's what most people don't realize. Opposition is not just about stopping you, it's about studying you. The forces that confront you are often not trying to destroy you outright. They're trying to locate your weakness. Is it fear, pride, impatience, isolation? They test your thresholds. They push just enough to see how you respond. And every time you retreat, they take note. Every time you abandon your voice, your vision, your conviction, the resistance recalibrates. This is not to make you paranoid, but to make you aware, because awareness breeds discipline, and discipline is how you become unshakable. We often think that walking in purpose should feel easy, doors opening, people supporting, everything flowing. But the truth is, the deeper your alignment, the more deliberate your resistance. It's a sign that something in you is finally waking up, and the system that benefited from your sleep is starting to panic. So don't misinterpret the opposition, don't let it make you small. Don't allow the false assumption that if it's hard it must not be right to take root. Sometimes the very thing that resists you is the thing that confirms your assignment. Because if your presence causes disturbance, maybe it's because you were never meant to keep the peace. You were meant to bring the sword. And here's the deeper irony, the same resistance that tries to weaken you also sharpens you. It forges your focus. It clarifies your motives. It trains your perception, because opposition, when met with clarity, transforms into discipline. And discipline, when sustained through pressure, becomes power. So if your path is filled with resistance, unexpected, unexplainable, relentless, don't collapse. Pay attention, reflect, discern, then press on. You are not being attacked because you are weak. You are being opposed because what you carry has already begun to disturb what prefers to remain unchallenged. Asterisk, asterisk, so remember this. What resists you often reveals you. And once you learn to stop taking it personally, you'll start to see it as the training ground it was always meant to be. Asterisk, asterisk, let's take a moment to look inward, not at the miracles, not at the calling, not even at the resistance, but at the interior landscape that must be cultivated to sustain the weight of the anointing. Many desire the power, few accept the purification, and this is where the journey becomes deeply personal and often painfully misunderstood. Because when God truly marks you, He doesn't begin by increasing your influence. He begins by confronting your inner world. There is a demand placed on the chosen that is not negotiable. A demand for radical integrity, not just the surface-level honesty that impresses others, but the kind of soul-level truthfulness that dismantles illusions within yourself. You cannot fake your way through this. You cannot carry this kind of spiritual weight and remain double-minded. The more dangerous the anointing, the more exacting the standard becomes, because what you carry has the power to liberate or to destroy. It has impact, and without inner purity, that impact becomes corrupted. You begin to feel this in subtle ways. Your conscience sharpens. Things you once tolerated in yourself, small lies, impulsive decisions, unchecked emotions suddenly become unbearable. You're not being judged from the outside, you're being refined from the inside. The same patterns that others can get away with will not leave you in peace. Your internal system is being rewired, and that discomfort, it's not punishment, it's the evidence of the Spirit at work in you. This inner purification is not about perfection. It's not about moral superiority. It's about alignment. It's about being able to carry divine truth without distortion, because a polluted vessel cannot pour clean water. And a fragmented soul cannot be trusted with sacred authority. If there's ego, it will taint the message. If there's unhealed resentment, it will leak into your decisions. If there's secret addiction, it will compromise your clarity. So the cleansing begins not with the outer world, but with the mirror. And that mirror for the chosen becomes brutal. You will be shown your motives, you will be shown your blind spots, not to shame you, but to save you. Because the higher you rise, the more devastating your fall will be if you haven't done the inner work. And when you carry a dangerous anointing, the fall isn't just about you. Others are tied to your life. Your breakthrough is someone else's permission. Your collapse is someone else's confusion. That's why the refining process is so unrelenting. What makes it even more complex is that this purification often comes in the form of temptation, not just to sin, but to settle. The temptation to compromise a little, just to fit in. The temptation to soften your convictions so you're more accepted. The temptation to carry power while bypassing process. But each time you give in to those impulses, something in your spirit dulls. Something goes quiet, and over time, the voice of God becomes hard to hear, not because He stopped speaking, but because your frequency drifted away. So, this call to inner integrity is not about fear, it's about clarity. It's about being so deeply rooted in truth that when pressure comes, and it will, you do not bend into who you used to be. You remain anchored, grounded, clear. This doesn't mean you'll never struggle. It means your struggle will never have the final word. Because every time you fall, you'll return to alignment faster. Every time you waver, you'll recalibrate more quickly. That is what inner purity produces: resilience, not rigidity, strength, not performance. Now let's look at it psychologically. When the mind is split, when there is a gap between who you are privately and who you pretend to be publicly, it creates internal chaos. That gap becomes a breeding ground for anxiety, self-sabotage, and exhaustion. The chosen cannot afford that kind of fragmentation. You are called to carry something whole, and for that to happen, you must become whole. Inner contradiction weakens authority. But inner congruence, where thought, word, and action align, creates presence. It creates power that does not need to shout, because it resonates from a place of truth. And yet, this purification is not a one-time event. It is ongoing, a continual invitation to surrender what no longer serves your purpose. To let go of old identities, outdated narratives, and inherited patterns that keep you small. This is not easy. It will cost you familiarity, it will cost you comfort, but it will also set you free. Because when you are no longer divided within yourself, you become impossible to manipulate from the outside. You become steady, and that steadiness becomes the platform for divine expression. So if life seems to be cornering you, if everything in your world is pressing you toward honesty, discipline, and self-confrontation, lean into it. Stop resisting the fire. Let it burn what must be burned, because that fire is not consuming you. It is revealing you. And what will remain on the other side is something the world cannot duplicate. A soul that is clean, a spirit that is steady, and a life that is ready. So ask yourself, in the quiet moments, what in me must die so that what is sacred can live? Because the vessel must match the value. And your integrity is the womb through which your anointing will safely be born. There comes a point in the journey of every chosen one where the ground beneath them begins to shift, subtly at first, then violently. The life they once knew starts to fall apart, not from external destruction, but from an inner unraveling that refuses to be ignored. This is not coincidence, it's not bad luck, it's not failure, it is death, the kind that precedes a rebirth. And if you carry a dangerous anointing, you will go through this cycle more than once. Not because God is cruel, but because what you are called to carry cannot coexist with what you used to be. Most people avoid collapse at all costs. We are taught to maintain, to preserve, to stabilize. But for those marked by divine purpose, there are times when maintenance becomes a threat to transformation. What you've built, your identity, your routines, your relationships, can become a prison if it no longer matches your spiritual assignment. And when that mismatch becomes unbearable, life will force the question, are you willing to let the old die so the real can live? It's easy to speak of destiny. It's much harder to speak of the deaths that destiny demands, death of the false self. Death of control, death of reputation, death of attachment. These are not symbolic losses, they're real. You will feel them in your bones. You will mourn who you were, even if you no longer admire that version of yourself. Because that former identity, as limited as it was, gave you structure. It gave you a way to move in the world. And when that structure dissolves, the in-between becomes almost unbearable. You begin to feel like nothing. No longer who you were, and not yet who you're becoming. This space is sacred, though terrifying. It's where many turn back, rebuilding the old just to escape the void. But the chosen, the truly anointed, learn to sit in that tension. They learn to endure the ambiguity without rushing toward resolution. Because something is happening beneath the surface. A seed doesn't bloom by clinging to the shell. It breaks open. It surrenders to the dark, trusting the invisible process of becoming. Psychologically, this process is disorienting. It dismantles your ego, your coping mechanisms, your illusion of control. You are no longer the expert of your own life. You are now a student of pain, of patience, of paradox. You realize that healing is not linear, and growth often masquerades as loss. There are days when you feel like you've regressed, not progressed. But what's actually happening is that your old operating system is being uninstalled, and a deeper, more integrated self is being installed in its place. You're not being punished, you're being emptied, and not just of bad habits, but of the energy signatures that kept you trapped in cycles: fear, pride, performance, resentment. These aren't just emotional reactions, they are entire spiritual postures, and for the anointing to fully rest upon you, these postures must collapse. Not through shame, but through clarity. You start to realize, I cannot go where I'm called and still cling to what once worked. What carried me here cannot carry me forward, and that's where rebirth begins, not with fireworks, but with quiet resolve. A new part of you emerges, not fabricated, not forced, but born from fire. This version of you is less reactive, more rooted. Less concerned with appearance, more in love with truth. You become less dependent on external validation because your authority is now internal. It is forged from everything you had to lose in order to become who you were always meant to be. Philosophically, this is the rhythm of all true transformation, death before resurrection. It mirrors the seasons, the cosmos, the very nature of evolution. Nothing is sustained without change. And nothing changes deeply without first dying to what no longer serves. So instead of resisting these cycles, begin to cooperate with them. Learn to see endings as sacred. Learn to bless the breaking, because what's being dismantled is not your destiny, it's your delusion. It's the scaffolding around your soul that kept you safe, but also kept you small. When you carry an intense and dangerous anointing, these cycles come with greater force. The higher the calling, the deeper the collapse, because what you are being prepared to carry cannot be built on sand. It must be built on bedrock, on identity that has been tested, on faith that has survived the silence, on strength that came not from applause, but from surrender. And that kind of foundation can only be formed through death and rebirth. If you're in the middle of that process now, don't rush it. Don't try to rebuild prematurely. Let it burn, let it fall. Let the version of you that was never truly alive come to its end. Because what is on the other side of that surrender is not just restoration, it is resurrection, and resurrection doesn't bring back what was. It births something entirely new. ***. So when everything starts to fall apart, ask yourself, not how do I fix this, but what in me must now rise? Because the fire doesn't come to destroy the chosen. It comes to reveal what can no longer die. ***. There's something that refuses to die inside the chosen, even after the collapse, even after the silence, even after the stripping away of everything that once gave them meaning. It's subtle at first, a whisper in the depths of your being that says, you were made for more. You may not know what the more is. You may not have the map or the method, but the fire is there. It flickers in the darkest moments and burns strongest when logic says it should have gone out long ago. This is not ambition, it's not ego, it's not the need to prove yourself to anyone. In fact, by this point, you've probably lost the taste for external validation. You've seen how fleeting it is. What remains now is purpose, not the kind that inflates the self, but the kind that humbles it. A purpose that is heavy and holy, a purpose that won't let you rest in mediocrity, even when mediocrity feels safer. This is one of the most revealing signs of a dangerous anointing. You cannot quit. You might walk away in exhaustion. You might break down under the weight. You might even curse the call in moments of weakness, but you always come back. You always return, not because things got easier, but because something deeper than pain keeps calling you forward. That call is not emotional, it's not circumstantial, it's elemental. It has become a part of your spiritual DNA. There's a kind of inner pressure that builds in the life of the chosen, a pressure not to perform but to align. And when you stray from that alignment even slightly, you feel the dissonance immediately. You lose peace. You lose clarity. You feel off-center. This inner sensitivity to misalignment is not weakness, it's training. It's how the anointing keeps you tethered to truth when everything around you is pulling you into compromise. What makes this even more mysterious is how little external evidence you sometimes have. On the surface, nothing is moving. No doors are opening. No signs are confirming, but the conviction won't leave you. The fire won't die. And that tension between inner certainty and outer silence becomes your initiation. It forces you to develop a relationship with purpose that is not dependent on progress. That is a rare kind of strength. Psychologically, we could describe this as resilience or grit, but those words don't quite capture the spiritual dimension of what's happening. This isn't just about endurance, it's about obedience to something eternal, something that existed before you were born and will continue after you're gone. And when you realize that your life is not your own, that you are a vessel for something beyond your personal story, you begin to move differently. You stop asking for easy. You start asking for clarity. You stop chasing outcomes. You start stewarding your presence. The chosen ones who carry this kind of anointing often find themselves misunderstood, not because they speak in riddles, but because they live by a compass that others don't see. They make decisions that don't always make sense on paper. They walk away from opportunities that others would kill for. They say no when everything around them says yes, and they do it not from arrogance but from alignment. Because once you've tasted divine assignment, you lose the appetite for artificial success. But make no mistake, this kind of purpose comes at a cost. It will isolate you, it will stretch you, it will put you in situations where the only thing keeping you going is the fire inside. And that's the point, because what the world calls pressure, heaven uses as precision. Every time you think it's over, every time you think you've hit your limit, you find that something in you rises. Not by force, but by calling, and that calling won't let you settle. This is why the anointing is dangerous. Not just because of what it empowers you to do, but because of what it refuses to let you escape. You were not chosen for comfort. You were chosen for confrontation, for truth, telling, for boundary, breaking, for change shattering, and those kinds of assignments don't come with easy paths. They come with fire, and the only way to survive that fire is to become fire yourself. So if you're tired but still burning, if you feel unseen but still compelled, if you've been knocked down but not extinguished, recognize the gift in that. It's not just persistence, it's design. You were built to last through what would break others, not because you're better, but because what's inside you was never yours to begin with. It's purpose, and purpose does not quit. Asterisk asterisk, so if you still burn even after all you've lost, then you haven't failed, you've been found. Let that fire speak, let it guide you, because it's not there to warm you, it's there to awaken the world. Asterisk asterisk.